Bitcoin made an all-time high, but altcoins are still far away from all-time highs. In this video, we're going to discuss when alt season happens and what you need to do. Bitcoin has reached a new all-time high and it's currently above 110k. In the previous video, we called the breakout, and now the question is when altcoins are going to move and follow through with Bitcoin. And I spent all my time analyzing and researching the markets, making the best content that I can make, or try to do that. And if you would like me to continue doing that, I've got a small question for you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And I promise to you that I keep on delivering this content surrounding the portfolio, macroeconomics, and investment decisions that you need to make. Now, Bitcoin has hit the all-time high. It's a very small new all-time high. Against the euro, it is not even close to an all-time high. But the good part is that altcoins are starting to outperform slightly. And if we look at the data, which Quinton also tweeted on his own channel, we have the new meme of this cycle, which is the global M2 supply versus the Bitcoin price. In this case, the 102-day lag, which is like 14 and a half weeks. Which shows that we are just following through with the liquidity, and that would mean that we are about to continue in the coming, let's say, 2 months to 150k. And I think more and more macro analysts, but also economists are saying perhaps this bull cycle, Bitcoin is just going to continue grinding upwards. And we're not really going to see that type of vertical price action taking place. And that would be very good, as that would be a reason that Bitcoin becomes more mature. And in that sense, we get into a thesis that we might be getting into a longer cycle. As Quinton also tweeted the chart regarding the MVRV and NUPL, which is basically an indicator that shows how the profit is for people that are holding Bitcoin or short-term holders, which is usually peaking in terms of, or in times of heavy volatility upwards. As you can see in the chart, in 2017, you had multiple peaks. In 2021, we also had multiple peaks at the beginning. But as we currently can see, it's not the case. So the short-term holders are not in profit, slightly at this point, as we have seen the run towards 110k. But it signals, and all the on-chain data signal that we're not close towards an actual all-time high. And that indicates that there's a lot more to come, and that we're not close to a peak, and that the likelihood of the 4-year cycle is currently vanishing away. By the way, on Tuesday next week, we are going to release a podcast with Willem Middelkoop, famously known for his thesis surrounding the collapse of the US dollar and the big reset. And he has a thesis about Bitcoin and gold, and the conversation was super insightful for myself, so I think it's also very insightful for you. So make sure to check out our tweets. We'll release the podcast on Tuesday. Now, the things surrounding the markets going into a longer cycle has a lot to do with the chart that TechDev has been pushing around, which is the business cycle and the liquidity. And the business cycle is just taking longer and longer and longer, in a sense that currently we are in a 4-year bear market for altcoins. And as you can see, we are still at the bottom of the business cycle. It's still slightly waking up. And in previous cycles, we have anticipated that once the business cycle becomes more positive, that's the period where altcoins start to flourish. And at this point, we have just barely seen a slight wake-up call, which means that if you continue to add that, then we are likely going to see a longer period than the standard 4-year cycle. And there is also a case that if you look at this chart, that if the bear markets become longer, the bull markets become longer, and liquidity has increased in the Bitcoin price or in the Bitcoin markets through the ETF, through which we are currently celebrating a breakout of Bitcoin above 110k. While if we wouldn't have had the inflow in the ETF, I think we would have been celebrating a breakout above 60k at this point. So the additional 50K is primarily being added through the ETF, but it doesn't change the dynamics of the markets. I think that's still the same. And that signals that the price of Bitcoin is likely going to go significantly higher and that we're not close to a peak, as also the chart of Bitcoin versus gold is showing that we're still down 15 to 20% of the all-time high in 2021, while every cycle, the valuation of Bitcoin against gold is substantially higher than in the previous cycle. So there's a lot more to come. And that's the part for Bitcoin. Now, the primarily question is, again, Bitcoin is moving upwards. When are the altcoins going to shine? And that's what we're going to discuss next. Historically, a Bitcoin all-time high is a signal for more conviction and confidence in the markets, and that should lead towards more strength in the altcoin markets. However, right now, there are a lot of people saying Bitcoin is going to peak in the coming 1 to 2 months. We won't be going higher than, let's say, 130, 150K. And that would mean that the altcoins are not really going to get a run. And I think that a lot of people are going to be wrong this cycle, just like previous cycles. And I had my mistakes as well. But the thing is that the fact that Bitcoin grinds upwards is an ideal scenario where altcoins are going to outperform. Unless Bitcoin is going to get vertical, that's the moment where Bitcoin pairs are going to lose. Now, I wanted to swing back towards the chart that TechDev has provided, which is the business cycle chart. And I think I can remake this chart, but it's ultimately, he makes it visually great. And it tells the entire story, which is that in the previous bear markets and bull markets, it just keeps on expanding. There's more money in the markets, through which the case of having a bull market takes longer as more money is required to make the markets go up even more. And that's the case with Bitcoin as well. It's like if you need Bitcoin to go to 200, 300, 400K, more money is required to make it happen. But that money is implying a certain supply shock as more and more people are not like looking to sell their Bitcoin at this point. And if you think about the supply shock, then the same can be said about altcoins. If Bitcoin goes down by a relatively low liquidity or relatively low volume, Ethereum has been going down even more by even less volume. And that is just because there's less supply on the markets. And I think the past quarter has shown that crypto can drop independent of crypto. It's all macroeconomic. As crypto itself fundamentally has been growing substantially. Ethereum Pectra and all the progressive stuff that we saw in the US. So I think that once it swings back, then we are going to get back to the neutral levels. And on top of that, we add the fundamental growth that crypto has been seen. So that's why I think the downwards fall is through low liquidity, but upwards it's the same metric. And I think the chart of TechDev is showing that if you see the business cycle, then you have a bottom, which is the biggest red candles that we see here. And currently we are at that stage, which is comparable to the beginning of 2020. And if you recall, the previous bottom of ETH versus Bitcoin was in September 2019. And then we had 2 years of bull market. And now we kind of have the same period where we start bottoming out in 2025, where it's very likely that we keep on expanding that bull cycle in the coming, let's say, 1.5 to 2 years, just like TechDev is saying, with a longer cycle taking place. And if we see it here, he's on par with my thesis that I think Bitcoin is going to have a .com type of cycle comparable to 2017, where the valuations are going to be irrationally high. Now, if we go to ETH versus Bitcoin, then the chart versus the Chinese renminbi is identical, which says, you can't see it here, but the Chinese renminbi made a bottom in the first 2 weeks of April. And those 2 weeks were the bottom for ETH versus Bitcoin as well. And in the previous cycles, we actually made a bottom in August of 2019, and the Chinese renminbi did the same, and we did the same in 2020, and we did the same in 2016. So the signals are getting stronger, and it's very likely that we're going to have that expansion. And now if you look at my portfolio, then you can see that I'm not really moving that much in terms of the valuation of the portfolio. I'm still down 50%. Tau remains to be the strongest horse in my portfolio. Next to that, we have Sai. I'm not at my monthly rebalancing point at this point, but I'm looking to see that if Bitcoin continues to grind, it's very likely that this is going to quickly go back towards break even. And if we recall from previous runs, it can go substantially fast. And I think that a lot of people underestimate the complexity of joining a run instead of being too early, because if altcoins start to run at this point, you will constantly question yourself whether it's going to be the actual run or whether it's a fake rally and it goes back down. And then all of a sudden Ethereum is at 3.3K and you start wondering, how did I miss the first run? So markets are more complex than you might think of. And that's why I, of course, had a lot of pain having the altcoin portfolio and being down this much. But at least I'm positioned and I've not sold. So that means that from here, it should be getting better. And if we look at things like optimism, there are some signals showing that we will at least have some upwards momentum given the fact that we have higher time frame bullish divergences taking place. And on the left side of the screen, you can see that once it starts to run, it goes fast. And also historical price action has shown the exact same, where if you look at AVAX versus Bitcoin, then it's very short windows that the markets are actually providing that run. For instance, AVAX in 2021, we basically bottomed out, and within a few weeks, it went 12x against Bitcoin and did another run in 2021 later, where it signals that once the altcoins return in their mojo of going back up, it can go fast. And then I'm quite happy to be positioned into the coins that I have right now in terms of expecting that actual breakout, and the breakout is taking place above the all-time high for Bitcoin. In previous periods, as you can see, the breakout of Bitcoin above 12K in October of 2020 was close to the period that we started breaking up with the altcoins. So Bitcoin moves first, conviction comes back in, and that's when the run starts to take place. And if we look at, for instance, for Chainlink, it's also at a cycle low. And in previous cycles, we started to make it multiple runs where we are having 4 to 5x runs against Bitcoin, 60% corrections, and then another one. So the key here is that we are at the start of that actual bull cycle. We are at the start of altcoins. For instance, optimism, as I've shown, is on the weekly time frame showing indicators are being beneath 30 for the first time in the history. And if you just rationally look at that actual valuation, it is an ultimate period to actually accumulate your coins. And we also know from historical price action that once the altcoins start to run, they go fast. So likely the portfolio will go back up. But I think that the perfect storm for an alt season is about to start. The primary question of this video is whether we are in an altcoin run or not. It's not really called alt season, it's more or less just having a risk on appetite. And as I've shown in this video, we are not at the end of the bull cycle, we are at the start of the actual bull cycle, as we can see with the altcoins against Bitcoin. I don't know how high it will go, I don't know how long it will last, but I think that the arguments of having a longer cycle start to pile up against the 4-year cycle. And I think that there are many similarities of the bottoming of the altcoin markets of 2019 and 2016 compared to the one right now. And it shows that retail sentiment is still terribly bad, and they will come in. They will come in later this year when Bitcoin is at 150K, Ethereum is back at $4,000, and then retail starts to wake up. So we tend to have a nature of comparing variables in a certain way that is making it super complex for ourselves. I think this cycle has shown that everything is different from the previous cycles compared to this one. So it doesn't make sense to compare those cycles with each other. as we had an all-time high for Bitcoin prior to the halving, we have seen a terrible Q1 of 2025, which should have been the best quarter for altcoins. So why should the rest of the cycle be the same as the previous cycles when everything has been different anyways? So I think that we need to understand that there is a fundamental underlying factor with other variables that are moving the markets. And once we understand those, that's when we can start making the actual return. And that's why I believe that we are at the start of the bull cycle where altcoins are about to run. Make sure to subscribe. I'll see you again on the next update. Ciao. During these markets, I'm always looking for opportunities to build my portfolio, and OKX is bringing you an opportunity. They are the first fully licensed exchange in Europe with the lowest fees. And to help you a little bit with your portfolio and to celebrate this milestone, they are giving away up to 50 euros in Bitcoin if you sign up today on the exchange. Signing up can be done within 5 minutes, and if you deposit 100 euros worth of crypto, you'll receive the first 20 euros in Bitcoin. Start rebuilding your portfolio today. Go to the link in the description or scan the QR code and enjoy up to 50 euro in Bitcoin.